Morning, everyone. Yesterday, I started off reporting that they were going to be locking down some parts of Ontario, and yeah, they were. And now there's fines as well. News Talk 1010 says breaking. This is 20 hours ago. Ford government introduces new fines for breaking indoor-outdoor social gathering rules. 10,000 up to 100,000 for individuals, possible jail. 10,000 up to 50,000 for a director, officer of a corporation. 10,000 up to 10 million for a corporation. Oh my goodness, right? And still, Carl makes this point: an ethics breach fine is $300, but hosting my wife's 50th could cost me $100,000 and some jail time, maybe, if it's an individual that you're just representing, right? You should be in jail, man. How dare you organize this dangerous birthday party? There's a word for that, says Sil. Yeah, here's some ethics breaches. Just, 2017 ethics breach, $200 fine, Conflict of Interest Act. Bill Morneau and Will Ferrell look alike. Married to the McCain dynasty, right? The McCain heiress is his wife. McCain French fries, that's Bill Morneau's wife. Here's another one, $300 fine. Isn't this egregious? Isn't this egregious? Is that the word Sil was alluding to? Unbelievably outrageous. I think that's, yeah. If you're part of the ruling class and you breach ethics, well, you get a slap on the wrist. But if you dare to host a party, how dare you? Jail time for you. Jail time. Okay, here's Doug Ford. He says, to help stop the spread of COVID-19, our government has set new limits on the number of people permitted to attend unmonitored social gatherings in 3 regions, Ottawa, Peel, and Toronto. This takes effect September 18th. We're going to talk about how this is not a good idea. Don't worry. CTV News is reporting. Ontario slashes gathering limits in 3 COVID-19 hotspots. Here are the new rules. So I just want to show you what CTV is talking about as well. Ontario will be rolling back social gathering limits in Toronto, Peel Region, and Ottawa to 10 people indoors and 25 outdoors as of Friday. Premier Doug Ford made the announcement on Thursday afternoon at Queen's Park, saying that the new rules apply to unmonitored social gatherings and organized public events held on private property or in parks. Quote, we've seen 2 days this week of over 300 new cases within a 24-hour period, Ford said. As a province, we have to help them, all 3 regions, not just stop the spread to other parts of Ontario, but to keep everyone safe and healthy. Ford clarified that the restrictions do not apply to events or gatherings held in staffed businesses or facilities such as movie theaters, banquet halls, gyms, or convention centers. This is really, you stop hanging out with your friends at your house. But movie theaters are fine. And all of these other things that have been closed and preventing, having people wait outside, etc. They're not going back to all of that. They're just it's very specific. If you organize a party, you're going to jail. But if you breach ethics, man, well, you could stay in your job. Back to this. These facilities can still have 50 people indoors as long as people maintain proper physical distance from anyone outside their 10-person social circle. The new rules also do not apply to places of worship or wedding ceremonies, although large receptions held in private residence, backyards, or parks will fall under the gathering limits. I scroll down a little bit. In addition to the new gathering restrictions, the Premier said his government will be proposing heavy fines up to $10,000 for anyone who organizes a private gathering that exceeds the limits. This is in addition to the current $750 fine for those caught violating COVID-19 rules. This is the highest fine anywhere in the entire country, Ford said. We will throw the book at you if you break the rules, and we cannot afford to have a few rules breakers reverse all of the progress Ontario has made over the past 6 months. The amendment to the Reopening Act still has to be passed in the legislature, and they've got a majority, so it's probably going to pass. I'm going to talk about schools again at the end of this, and I'm going to talk about how it relates to this, but I want to make another point first. So we're going to come back to this a bit later, but what about the number of people in schools? The new restrictions will have no impact on Ontario schools. Health Minister Christine Elliott stressed that students have already been divided into cohorts and that teachers and staff are taking every precaution necessary. We're talking about an entirely different situation between the plan that has been set up in our schools to protect our students and these totally unmonitored social events where none of the public health rules are being followed at all, Elliott said. Speaking at a news conference ahead of Ford's announcement, Ontario NDP leader Andrea Horwath said that she finds it shocking the Premier is not mandating smaller class sizes while still reducing the number of people who can gather socially. People will wonder what is the right thing to do when in one place you can only have 10 people, but in another you can have 25 to 50 people. It creates much more confusion, she said. Everybody knew that the second wave was coming. Everyone knew that the end of the summer, the fall was upon us. The numbers would be going up, that parents would be worried about school, and kids would be going back to crowded schools and crowded buses. So fear, right? And here's the city of Guelph. We have 1 person in hospital, 24 active cases, 11 deaths, and the deaths haven't changed. The deaths haven't really changed. They haven't changed in Guelph for a long time. So I find it interesting, the fear mongering, right? The cases are going up. Parents are worried about their kids. Schools are going to be getting cases. Cases mean nothing. Like if you get a case of the flu and you stay home and you get better and you go back to school, I mean, that's terrible. The flu's awful and I feel bad for you. But, move on, man. It's part of life, right? Dying is the thing that you wanted to avoid, or originally we wanted to avoid. Flatten the curve so we're not overwhelmed, right? This is deaths. This is according to the Ontario plan here. I'll just show you the top here just because I want to show you. Public Health Ontario. This is the daily epidemiological summary up to September 16th, 2020. Okay? And this is the deaths. This is the deaths. Regardless of the uptick in cases, this is the deaths up to September 13th. And it's incredible that we are, we haven't had a lot of deaths. And it's incredible that we're looking at this and saying we need to lock down. And it's not just me that says lockdowns are a bad idea. Okay, here's one example. There are many examples, but this is one example. And this is Matt Strauss, MD. He's a doctor, apparently, according to his Twitter profile. I thought I was following him. I'll follow him now. Oh, it's Canada. That's why. I'll follow him anyway. But he's a critical care doctor, aesthetic cyclist, journalist, bylines at Vice, Spectator, National Post. He once sang with Iggy Pop. Okay, so he's a journalist doctor. I mean, you got to have two careers. Okay. He says, remember 4 months ago when I was tweeting that Georgia and Florida had the right strategy and everyone in my mentions was saying to wait for it and deaths are a lagging indicator. And he's responding to his own June 4th tweet of, I'm going to keep tweeting the Georgia COVID graph until the lockdowns end. They opened up 6 weeks ago, yet COVID deaths keep going down. This is indisputable. Lockdowns are unnecessary overkill. And so they opened up, and amidst the open up, the deaths continued to decrease. I just showed you the deaths in Ontario have consistently been low. This is a manageable thing. We are not going to be overwhelmed. And anyway, Matt Strauss, MD, continues. I was right. They've had half as many per capita deaths as hard lockdown states, and their hospitals were never overwhelmed. I'm not here to gloat. I'm begging you to consider that lockdowns might be counterproductive before we shoot ourselves in the other foot. And I'm trying to make the same case, essentially. Lockdowns and if you're fearful and you want to stay safe, don't go to restaurants, don't go out, go to the grocery store and wear your mask, but don't force masks on people. Don't force restaurants and businesses to close. Don't force people to stay inside and on their couch with threats of fines, right? Like that is not how to live. And we don't have a system like that. You cannot fear. You have more chance of dying in a car accident on your way to work than you have of COVID-19. I don't have that. That's not a source stat. That's me saying that, and I'm not sure about that. But at the same time, based on these charts, based on what's going on out here, I'm very confident that probably it's more likely you'll get into a car accident, right? Much more likely. But it seems like the wrong move to shut down the economy for a disease that most people don't die from, don't have any lasting impression from. And there was somebody on my Twitter feed this morning trying to tell me that strokes and heart disease and all sorts of other stuff are lasting impacts of COVID-19. Or he was saying, I can't remember exactly what he was saying, and I don't really care. But I said, this thing is brand new. How can you say, how do we know that that's a lasting thing? Was HCQ and zinc used in the early stages to help treat this? Was HCQ and zinc used after? It seems like, well, I didn't say that, but I asked about the parameters of things before I decided he was a troll and blocked him. But fundamentally, if you are guaranteed to hurt a lot of people by shutting the economy, then, or keeping the economy open and people have to take a risk and they get the choice of that risk, then I take the risk every day. Freedom is messy and dangerous, and we should be allowed to make our choices based on reality. And the reality is you could step out your front door and get hit by a car, right? Crossing the street, you didn't look the right way, done. And that's not good. It's just true. And the fact that the government is trying to sell this, we're going to keep you safe. I don't think they can keep you safe. I think that in their attempts to keep you safe, they're doing more harm than good. Okay, here's a National Post opinion. So it's an opinion piece. Politicians receive low marks on protecting rights during COVID-19. This is a problem, right? At the end of March, someone brought COVID-19 to a funeral in St. John's, Newfoundland. Within weeks, more than 200 people in Newfoundland and Labrador had tested positive, and at least 3 of them had died. It was an emergency, and outgoing Premier Dwight Ball knew he had to act. But Ball went too far. He responded with amendments to the province's Public Health Protection and Promotion Act that looked more like something from a police state than a democracy. The new law suggested inspectors could pull people over, scroll through their cell phones, copy their private information, and forcibly perform COVID-19 tests. The law made clear that if 2 ministers decided that a person had contravened the act, he or she could be imprisoned or expelled from the province without a hearing. The province also began barring non-Newfoundlanders from entering, contrary to the division of powers set out in the Constitution Act 1867, and without any regard for the interprovincial mobility rights set out under Section 6 of the Charter Rights and Freedoms. This unconstitutional order meant that a woman who lived in Nova Scotia, which was nearly COVID-free, couldn't attend her mother's funeral. For these restrictions and more, Ball receives a failing grade from the Canadian Constitution Foundation in our new report card, grading our leaders' respect for the Constitution during COVID-19. Leaders were ranked on 6 dimensions of constitutional norms: democracy and rule of law, freedom of religion and conscience, freedom of assembly and speech, mobility rights, life, liberty, and security of the person rights, and privacy rights. Although some did better than others, Manitoba's Brian Pallister and Saskatchewan's Scott Moe got B averages. Every leader ended up with some low marks. Respect for democracy and rule of law were particularly lacking. Most of the country's provincial governments, Quebec, Ontario, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, Alberta, and British Columbia, proposed or passed laws that allow or would have allowed premiers to rule like kings by amending or suspending laws without consent of legislatures. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau thumbed his nose at the democratic norms when he replaced half of his daily question period with press briefings and tried to give his minority government the power to tax and spend without parliamentary approval until 2022. Freedom of expression, I scroll down, and assembly felt illegal in much of the country in the spring due to limits on group sizes that range from 2 people in Quebec to 50 in BC, but the Constitution is the supreme law that overrules all other laws, so premiers can't actually ban public protests. That didn't stop some of them from trying. Premier Ford famously called anti-lockdown protesters a bunch of yahoos and suggested that they were breaking the law despite no tickets being handed out by police. Premier Ball falsely claimed that protesting crab fishers only had a right to gather in normal circumstances. Privacy rights protected under Section 8 of the Charter also took some blows. Ontario created a creepy database of people who tested positive for COVID-19. It was supposed to protect first responders, but seemed unnecessary and ripe for snooping by police. The Ford government smartened up and abandoned the database, but not until after 95,000 searches had been done and the province was sued. Premier Legault, meanwhile, mused about asking the provincial police to use cell phone location data to track people who violated COVID-19 orders. It wasn't just Newfoundland's premier who interfered with mobility rights. Nova Scotia, PEI, and New Brunswick all put up roadblocks at provincial boundaries to keep their fellow Canadians out. Quebec's border closures were perplexing, considering its residents posed the biggest risk to others. There's lots of overreach from our government, and it's very, very concerning. And that's not me saying that, right? These are experts saying that in an opinion piece, no less. Take everything with a grain of salt. Okay, Global News is reporting premiers likely to ask for billions more in healthcare ahead of the Fed's throne speech. So we're getting into the throne speech. It's next Wednesday, and people are putting their Christmas list together. Dear Santa Trudeau, we'd like healthcare spending. I think that possibly the reason that we're seeing the continued lockdowns is monetary related. The government's willing to give money if they say that there's this problem, and so those cases, man, they're a big deal, big deal, right? So the premiers are doing the asks of the feds and the federal leaders. Jagmeet Singh, he's one of the balance of power, right? So if he votes for the throne speech, if he supports the Liberal government, then they're through, right? No problems at all. And the same with the Quebec, the Bloc. If the Bloc votes for Trudeau's throne speech, then they don't have to worry about anybody else. The rest can vote against it and say, yeah, we voted against this throne speech, but it'll be implemented because the confidence of the government is maintained. So here's Jagmeet Singh, and he says, people are asking me if I will support the throne speech, but the throne speech is just words on paper. It doesn't mean anything if the Liberal government doesn't back up their words with action. We will keep fighting so that people get the help they need during this pandemic. And this is a minute long. We'll listen to it. Here we go.
Be surprised. They did that in the campaign, but where has the action been? I won't be surprised if the Prime Minister says some nice things, says things that are things that we've been asking for. Universal pharmacare is something we campaigned on, we've been fighting for, we've been demanding for years now. And if the government announces something on that or talks about that, I won't be surprised. They did that in the campaign. But where has the action been? They have not actually done anything. And so I won't be surprised if the Prime Minister says some of the right things, says some of the things that Canadians want to hear, some of the things that we want to hear. But what I am worried about is that they'll just be empty words. Because again and again, we've seen this Prime Minister and this Liberal government talk about things, but then never act on them. They've talked about universal pharmacare, not delivered anything. We put forward a bill saying, let's take the first step in creating a Canadian Pharmacare Act that would help us move forward towards achieving this goal. They talked about the environment, but have yet to stop subsidizing fossil fuel companies.
And so there are people in my feed who retweeted that and said, translation, he will support the throne speech. To me, it sounds like he's saying Trudeau's all talk and no action. And it sounds like he's maybe signaling like maybe we won't support it because they haven't done anything. Regardless of what they've said, they haven't actually acted on those statements. 25% reduction in cell phone bill, billion trees planted, right? You need $200 million trees a year. And we're getting to the end of the year since the election, right? October 21st. And no trees planted. So are they going to have a big tree planting bonanza in October? Right? Get those trees planted, 200 million trees right now. I don't know. I don't think so. Probably not. So to me, it sounds like Jagmeet Singh is signaling maybe he won't support these Liberals and will plunge us into an election. And the Liberals are behaving as if there's an election. I've heard reports that both the Liberals and the Conservative Party have rented planes. And you would imagine them doing that if there's an election. The Liberals here, Justin Ling is saying, this is interesting. Len announced her candidacy today. She wasn't the only one running. Scotiabank economist Brett House was seeking the nomination as well. A by-election hasn't even been called yet, but it seems the Liberal Party has picked a candidate, and this is the Liberal Party tweet. They say a community leader, broadcaster, advocate, and mom for over 30 years. Marcy Len has been a champion for a better and more inclusive Canada, and we're excited to welcome her as our new Liberal candidate for Toronto Centre. And here is Marcy Len. She's the CTV's The Social host. So if you haven't seen that before, Candace is covering this. Liberals picking star candidates and having them parachuted into the riding is interesting. Them setting up for an election is interesting, despite their words. And I didn't play the clip yesterday of Trudeau saying Canadians don't want an election, it'd be irresponsible, and we shouldn't have an election, but we're going to have an election. He said we could figure it out. I think what he finished it on. But this is interesting. The signals all point to an election. This I'm showing you just because, so Ms. Chagger she says, if able to, wearing masks is one of the best way to help keep those around you safe. That's not borne out in the data at all. There's nothing that says cloth masks help prevent the spread of respiratory disease. I'm sorry, there isn't. Respiratory virus, no. The virus is like half a micron, like 0.05 microns big. This is a virtue signaling device and nothing more. And so before I commented on this, because I commented on this, I looked through, or after I commented on this, before I commented on this, before I looked through the comments, and then I looked at the comments and added it to my list to show you today because the comments are incredible. Wow, there's a lot of people who are not happy with this. Anyway, I'll carry on. She says, at the cabinet retreat this week, I wore a mask from a local Waterloo company that I'm proud to support. Okay, whatever. But first one, you should be in jail. Weren't you otherwise occupied resigning in disgrace? I could have sworn you lied under oath. And so many more tweets that are not supportive of Miss Chagger. And like some people saying, I live in your riding. Yeah, resign. There's a lot of people who are not happy with this Liberal government. And so that's interesting, right? Like a government, even a minority government, with the polls that they're consistently showing. The proroguing Parliament and what was the other thing? Proroguing Parliament and shutting down the WE investigations made Justin Trudeau's polls bounce right back, right? He's 60%. Everybody loves Justin Trudeau, right? And yet, when you look for the proof in the pudding, well, it's not there. It's not there. Moving on, and just like Twitter is one microcosm, and it's a very unique microcosm, right? Twitter's not Facebook. It's not really anywhere else. And it's not really real life either, right? Like polls don't match Twitter. There can be a lot of energy on Twitter, and that could seem like there's a lot underneath that. And then in the real world, right? Like, I had my account suspended multiple times just because some university students were group reporting my tweets, right? So like Twitter can amplify a lot. So take it with a grain of salt, as I say about everything. But it's interesting to note that the supportive tweets are far outnumbered by the tweets that say resign. You lied under oath. We don't trust you. Nobody trusts you, and other pieces. Right? It's very interesting. I clicked this and I had it all queued up. So I'm going to get it queued up again. Hold on. Okay, this is the climate minister talking with Vasi Kapoulas about bringing a new plan to COP26, and we're going to be missing our climate targets and all this other stuff. Well, I'm going to show you in just a minute that we knew 2 years ago that carbon taxes don't reduce our emissions. Okay, carbon policies and carbon taxes don't reduce emissions. They're a great tax vehicle, wonderful tax vehicle. That's probably what they're going to use to pay for UBI with, but they don't reduce carbon. But here we go. He's coming up with a brand new plan to bring to COP26. Here we go.
I am working very hard on our enhanced climate plan that will provide visibility to Canadians as to how Canada will become very much a world leader by addressing and exceeding the current 2030 targets. And that is certainly something that we are going to be moving forward with.
When?
Well, I will tell you that the major junctures are probably within the next 12 months. The budget is obviously an important thing, but I have said very publicly that I will be bringing a new plan to COP26, which is in the fall of next year. We certainly will be announcing our plan and our target, as well as a number of other elements of our nationally determined contributions that we need to take to that conference. So it will be well before that.
When they
So Canada's still moving forward with this green plan, although they've backed off the federal guys have backed off the rhetoric on that because it hasn't been playing well. But yeah, this is an article from 2018, and we knew then that the carbon taxes don't reduce emissions. It's just a lot of money for the coffers, right? Tax money coming in, and well, what are they doing with it? Redistributing it, right? It costs more to heat your home. It costs more to do all of these things, and that's not great, right? It doesn't help. A couple of quick stories to finish us off here. Pierre Poilievre and Candace Malcolm have an interview, and there's a link, and it's a good interview if you want to check it out. Link is in the description. Financial Post. There are people talking a lot about China's, and this is an opinion piece, but it's an important one. China is waging a global tech war, but our political leaders seem unaware. Yeah, or is it that they're just ignoring it? I don't know. I can't really tell. I thought this was kind of funny. The Fed's uncertain firearm buyback will start before amnesty for banned guns won't start. Will start before it ends. They don't think that they're going to be able to get the buyback finished or started before the law comes into effect, right? So. Again, just incompetence, right? Like if you've got a plan, execute the plan. But if your plan is we're going to ban guns and then take care of the details later, it doesn't usually end up working. And that's what we're seeing over and over again with these liberals. Okay, I said it at the beginning of the show, and I realized that I guess I could do it in the amount of time here. This is the Toronto Sun, and this is an opinion piece too, columnist opinion. And he says it's time to end the teachers' union's monopoly over public education in Ontario. And here is Andrea Horvath, just to remind you very quickly, that's Bill Morneau's ethics. Just to remind you very quickly, she's talking about reducing class sizes. She says, speaking at a news conference, NDP leader Andrea Horvath said she finds it shocking the Premier is not mandating smaller class sizes while still reducing the number of people who can gather socially. Okay, so that's what I'm going to talk about here. This is a problem because Ontario's teachers union refused to hire and promote based on merit. Instead of putting the hardest working, best performing teachers at the front of a classroom, their monopoly rules dictate that the teacher who's been around longest gets the spot, seniority. Okay, that's usual union rules. This does a disservice to every single student in Ontario's public school system. It's no wonder students' academic performance has been declining. Ontario's public schools' PISA test scores have been declining in reading, writing, and mathematics over the past decade, despite increases to funding for education, according to the Fraser Institute. And it's not just according to the Fraser Institute. PISA test scores are independent of Fraser. They're their own international rankings. So you can check the PISA out, and it compares apples to apples all of the countries of the world, right? Like, so Canada ranks this well on math, and the same test was given in other countries, and we see where their kids rank, okay, based on their education system. Canada did much better in in 2000 PISA than they did in 2012-15 PISA, and well, the PISA cycles, right? So the first one is math heavy and not so heavy on the English and the, what's the other one? The reading, writing, mathematics. So it's science. There's 3 major ones. It doesn't matter. I'm getting waylaid. But regardless, go check out PISA. It's independent of Fraser Institute, and it's an international thing. Despite declining student performance, back to the article, the costs keep going up. The average high school teacher in Ontario earned a total compensation of $103,926 in 2018. And this school year is 194 days, meaning they make $536 per day during the school year. Top earning teachers earned a total of $120,000, so that's $619 a day. And there are 15,000 teachers on the Sunshine List making more than $100,000 per year. There's a direct trade-off between teachers' compensation and classroom size. The more teachers are compensated, the fewer the province can afford. This means class sizes go up even as education funding goes up, right? Ending the teachers' union, and the whole premise of this article is this here. It says, ending the teachers' union's monopoly over public teaching jobs has worked well outside of Ontario. Teachers in Alberta's publicly funded charter schools, for example, are not allowed to be active members of Alberta's teachers' union. These schools have delivered better academic results for thousands of dollars less per student than Alberta's public schools with unionized teachers. So this is talking specifically about the damage that the union's doing, and the control that the union has in which teachers go in front of the classroom based on seniority, basically just when you're hired and nothing else. No job performance, anything, because job performance is kind of secondary to seniority. And so all else being equal, meaning that if you don't have a slip in your file saying that you were bad, or if you don't have a written warning or anything to that effect in your file, then all else is equal, as the union sees, then seniority is the deciding factor, right? And that's usually how it goes. And that's a union. I've been in many unions, so like that's just how it goes. Seniority. When did you get hired? Oh, well, Jerry's got 4 years on you, so he's going to get the job. And the idea is that 4 years experience would mean that that's the better teacher. Like, it's not necessarily just it's not just seniority. Seniority is supposed to mean something, right? But unfortunately, sometimes you get people who understand how not to do the job just right. They know how to not make people angry. They know how to not get the warnings. And so then all else is equal. So they get the jobs, and they fall asleep at their desk, or they don't do the right job, right? They don't do it well. And that's not everybody, but they are out there. I've seen them falling asleep at their desks. I've watched it, and I've defended it. So, what are you going to do? And defended it meaning I've been there representing people and saying, like, this is what the employer thinks. This is the context of the situation. This is how things shake out. But is that serving our students, right? Like, there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance of getting the right people, the most competent people in front of the classroom, and being able to weed out the deadwood in the union, because, man, there's a lot of it. There potentially can be a lot of it. Okay, that's enough out of me today. I thought it was going to be a short show. I didn't think I had enough tabs today. Unbelievable. Okay, thanks for watching, everybody. I do appreciate it. And check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful